A little bit brief. Okay. All right, we're live. So from earlier this week, we have my composition as you remember it, right? Black reveals and white conceals. I'm going to make my layer panel a little bit larger so you can see what I'm working with here on my screen. A really useful keyboard shortcut that I use all the time in Photoshop is if you just hold the space bar, you're able to get the hand icon and just click and drag around your canvas. It actually doesn't move any of the layers necessarily because the space bar, the hand tool, just clicking and dragging will allow me to move around my canvas here. So the first thing that I want to show y'all, if we check out the agenda for the day, is layer modes, layer options. So Photoshop is a layer-based program, obviously. But because it's been around for a while, there's been lots of iterations and lots of advancements made that allow you to further customize the things that are appearing on your layers and on your screens. So I'm gonna put this over here. I'm actually I'll find a better way to do the captions in a bit. Anyway, sorry. So here we are. If you double click on a layer, you'll see it'll pop up on a box like this. There are a ton of different extra kind of features or extra kind of visual stuff that you can change about the layer that's going to affect the things that are on that layer and the way that they look. The ones that I most commonly use are either gradient overlay or outer glow. And you can see when I click on them, they become check marked. There's boxes next to this. There's also a plus sign next to some of them, which allows you to add multiple overlays to a specific layer. And this is only going to focus. I wonder if I can undo that actually. Okay, now I just have a bunch of gradient overlays, so that's fine. I'm gonna make this window. I can't make it any larger. That's all right. Okay. What I can do is if I cancel out of here, okay, that removes them because I haven't made any changes yet. All right, if I double click on a layer in the gray space, right now I'm focused on the pen, and I know the outer glow makes a cool effect because it makes the outside edge of the pixels that are visible. Photoshop is only going to focus on the visible pixels. So if you have a mask, the layer styling won't affect the way that mask, or it won't affect the entirety of the pixels, only the visible pixels. I want to make this pen glow a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to double click on the gray space next to the pen. And it's going to pop open my layer style panel. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to click on outer glow, which is one of the last options that you can see in the layer style window. If I click on that, it's going to automatically apply it. And if I move my window, you can see that there's a very faint orange glow happening around the outside of my pen here. It's because whatever previous gradient I was using was orange. You can see inside of the outer glow, the main column on the layer style panel is where you can adjust a lot of the things. I'm going to pull mine over off screen just a tiny bit. Actually, sorry. This is a preview of what it's going to look like around the outside of the layer. So there's all these different options here. You can change the way that your color blends. I'm going to leave mine set to darker color for now. Opacity is how much light shows through. So if you look at the outline of the pen underneath, you can see it gets more orange the higher the opacity is. And noise is going to be how kind of grainy or how kind of, if you see, it's really hard to tell. Let me go okay and zoom in. You can see by adding grain, it's going to remove a lot of that blur and make my visual, whatever layer style I'm going to be applying, a lot more pixelated. So if I don't want that, I can always double click. You can see now that once I've clicked OK on anything in the layer styles panel, it adds these two eyeballs underneath that layer that you applied the specific style to. So I can turn off outer glow if I want to, or if I have multiple effects, I can turn them all off with the main eyeball. But you can choose what you want to be visual or what you want to be seen, because it's going to attach to that specific layer. You're also going to see this FX icon, which is a shorthand for effects, like visual effects, attached to whatever layer you have layer styling on. So let's go into some of the outer glow settings to make my pen a little bit more shiny, a little bit more glowing. To get directly back into the settings, instead of having to start fresh from the layer styles panel, I can double click on the word outer glow and it will bring me directly to the outer glow settings that I can adjust for my page. Let's see if I can, let me arrange this so you can see what's happening a little bit better. So I'll put the pen down here, double click on outer glow. Okay, cool. So you can have a pretty decent visual of what I'm changing while I'm changing it. There's lots of different options. I can't tell you what every single one of these does because, to be honest, when I use it, I'm just going off of vibes, right? I'm just kind of seeing what looks good, what looks cool. If I want something specific to happen, I can find out. But a lot of the times it's just me adjusting for vibes. So the biggest thing you're probably going to want to change about your outer glow is what color it is. So you can either choose to have a solid color, which is the left option here, or you can choose to have a gradient, which gradually moves from one color to another. I didn't make this gradient. Photoshop comes with a lot of default ones. And if you click on that orange bar, if you want a gradient on your glow, it's going to open up another menu called the gradient editor. What I did here, it's sorted by color. So if I wanted a green glow, I can click on this drop down in the file and be presented with a ton of different pre-made green gradients. If I want to do kind of an orange or bluish orange one, you can see it's going to automatically update my glow on my layer panel. Okay, let's say I don't want a green. Let's say I actually want my favorite color of purple. Let's go here. You can see how the different gradients are going to affect different amounts of the layer style. So even though I haven't changed any of the parameters, like noise, opacity, transparency, blend modes, any of those fun Photoshop buzzwords, by simply just kind of picking a color that I enjoy, it's going to affect differently, right? I can see hints of blue along the edge of my pen here, but the purple is very faint compared to this orange-blue situation where there's a lot more visual interest going on. It's a great place to start, especially with outer glow, to give it kind of a cool effect. You'll notice here too, if you want to get more specific with your gradient, you can adjust where the colors gradually change to one another. Now, the boxes on top of a gradient slider are light to dark. It's only the amount of luminosity. It's a white value to a black value. The colors on the bottom, the little squares are called stops because it's kind of like a quest along the way. If you're in web design, you hear me say quest a lot. But each of these stops is going to be where a new color happens. And Photoshop is going to do the math between all these different colors. You can add or remove, you can adjust. Let's say this kind of peachy orange and this kind of, I don't know, fleshy pink. I don't want as much of the fleshy pink, so I dragged too far and removed it. Control Z to bring that back. I'm going to click and drag on my orange box and reduce the space between those two stops, which is going to alter how much of that light pink shows through and increase the amount of that peachy orange that comes through. And you'll also notice when I adjust the stop on a gradient, I have these little midpoint sliders, these midpoint rhombuses that are going to change the amount of blending that happens between these two things. So if I click on my orange box, my orange stop, you can see that this rhombus is directly in the center between the, I don't know, magenta, I guess, of this stop on the right and the orange, this stop on the left. I can move that midpoint. If I move it closer to the orange, that means there's a shorter distance from the orange to the middle, allowing for more of the pink magenta color. And vice versa. If I move my, I added another stop. If I move my rhombus very carefully more towards the magenta side, that gives me a lot more orange distance to adjust my gradient. So you can get really fine-tuned with these gradients if you wanted to. So then when you're done, when you're ready to commit your change, you just click OK. We can change the blend mode. There's a lot of different blend modes available. You can just click through these, which is the next thing we're going to show off, that are going to change the way that the light behaves, the light, quote unquote, the simulation of the light behaves on your diagram. And you'll notice when I change my blend mode, this little square changes its kind of visual. That's going to be a sort of preview for how it's going to look on your final version, on your glowing pen, whatever have you, right? So if I wanted to do something like difference, these four at the bottom, difference, exclusion, subtract, and divide, are going to affect the pixels underneath. It's going to kind of create like a transparency and a see-throughness, as well as hue, saturation, color, and luminosities, how bright or dark something is, right? Luminosity is just going to be based on light. I kind of like the way that the blend mode luminosity gives it just the idea of light, kind of like a lightsaber, how there's that outer aura. But I still also want the color to be glowing. I don't just want a black and white glow. So what I can do is I can add another outer glow. If I click OK, should be able to add another outer glow. If I double click again, oh, let me add one outer glow. Okay, maybe I just can't. Maybe it's gradient overlay. All right, so it's perfect actually. So I'm going to change my things around a little bit. This is also a part of concept art, is maybe you find an art in general. Maybe the destination you originally had in mind is not what you actually want to do. You can mess around, you can go off the vibes a little bit. So because the outer glow gave my pen the glowing effect that I like, now I can go to gradient overlay, and that's going to overlay a gradient over the whole thing. But now I can adjust the color the same way that I did on the outer glow version. But you'll notice in my preview right here, it's applying that gradient over the top of the layer, over the actual visual part. I don't want that. So I'm going to change my blend mode from normal to something that's going to be something like screen or overlay, so that I still get the color underneath my pen. If I did like pin light or something, that's going to give it a little bit of glow. Again, just going off of vibes. I can adjust the opacity slider a little bit. I can adjust the angle of the gradient. You can see on this projector, more so than the Zoom room. You can see by adjusting the angle of the gradient, it's going to change how those colors mix across my my pen. So I want it to follow, just generally vibing. I want to follow the direction of the pen. So I'm going to set my angle at a similar direction that my pen is sitting in my composition. You can change the scale. You can change how large or how small. So we move this over here. You can see what's going on. When I adjust the scale, you can see how it moves that gradient, as well as in the preview window. You can also change the style of gradient. Linear is going to be a straight line. Radial is going to be circular. Angle is going to be kind of spinning around a specific point. Reflected is going to go forward and backward, make it like a palindrome. And then diamond is going to create sort of an epicenter and work its way outward. But you can apply multiple layer styles to a specific layer that's going to change the way that it's going to appear. So I'm going to click OK when I'm ready for that. I like how my pen has a little bit more kind of oomph to it now. It's got something cool visually that I can translate, or that I can, I don't know, further sell the idea that this is some type of special pen. So you've noticed, oops, I accidentally made another mask. The way that I changed the blend mode inside of the layer styles panel, specific to whatever I'm trying to do, you can also do to an entire layer. Like what I'm going to do, because the helmet has a glass quality to it, I'm going to try and make that more transparent. So instead of there just being a hole where my character's head is showing through with a little bit of blurring, I'm going to try to create a visual that makes it a little bit more like there's actually glass there. So it behaves a little bit more realistically. So I'm going to go to my space helmet layer. I have my mask, and I want to bring this data back in because I'm going to try and translate it or communicate it in a different way. So I'm going to take my brush tool, set to white to reveal. I'm going to bring those parts that I hid by painting with a white brush. I'm going to bring those back in and hide my character's face behind the original pixels that I brought in. So I'm clicking very frequently so that I have a lot of small changes that I can undo in case I need to. All right. Now I have my space helmet remade. If I go up here to where it says normal, right underneath kind, that's going to give you access to all of the different blend modes that Photoshop comes with. And it's the same blend modes that are on the layer styles panel. So I typically stick to these ones. I don't know how it's translating on the Zoom room with the preview, but if you look at my screen behind me, you can see how that creates that glassy quality. It creates that see-throughness because it changes the way that the pixels and their transparency interact with the surrounding pixels and their transparency. But you might notice that my solid part of my helmet, the white part, I'm going to set it to hard light because I like the way that it's creating that see-through effect on my helmet. You can see, though, that it's affecting the entirety of the pixels. If I turn the eyeballs off on each of these layers, I'll just leave the background here. It's still poking through some see-throughness on my shape here. So I want to adjust that using layer masks. So if I go into my space helmet, I zoom in a little bit here, should be able to paint with black to conceal. Oh, that's going to conceal the whole thing. Hold on. Let me try something different actually, because this didn't go the way that I intended, but it does have the vibe that I'm going for. So instead of changing the blend mode for the entire layer, I'm going to make a selection just on the glass part and change the blend mode on that so that it keeps the opaque parts opaque. I'm gonna take my magic wand tool and I'm going to, with my pixel layer selected, it's going to be the left-handed one, because if you select the mask, it's just black and white information. This actually has the pixels. So with my left icon selected on Space Helmet, I'm going to click in this space and it's going to make a pretty decent guess on what it wants me to focus on. If I shift click, you can, or if I hold shift, you can see there's a little plus underneath my magic wand now. I can click a little bit more. I think I selected the whole thing. I'm not going to do that. Control D to deselect. So I'm going to change my tool, click and hold on the magic wand to get the quick selection tool like this. All right. And then I'm going to try, that's a little bit closer for what I'm looking for. Okay. So I have two options here. I'm combining this idea of layer styling and masking, because if I just try to mask this part out, it might not work. If I change hard light, it's going to affect the whole layer because that's the layer blend mode. What I can do here is cut out this piece, make it a new layer, and make that my glass transparency, and then mask that original space out from the first layer, which I'll show you step-by-step visually so it makes more sense, from the first layer to get the effect that I'm going for. And since I already have the selection made, what I can do is right-click with my mouse, and I can go layer via copy right here. What layer via copy is going to do is it's going to take, if I turn off the Space Helmet layer, whatever pixels I selected, it's going to add them to a new layer, but it's going to keep the original data. If I turn off layer 1, which I'm going to rename mask glass, it's going to keep that original information there. But this is something that I can now change the layer mode without affecting the opaque parts of my original image. Something cool that you can do is if you hold Control on your keyboard and click on a layer, it will reselect whatever pixels are on that layer. So I hold Control and click on the thumbnail where my mouse currently is. Now that I've made this selection, I can go to my Space Helmet layer. The selection is going to remain, and I can hold Shift and then press Backspace. That is going to pop up my options for fill. Since I'm on a mask and white reveals and black conceals, I'm going to change my contents to be, if I want to hide this from another layer, I want to change that to black. Now, when I click OK, it's going to fill in this layer with black. We turn this mask glass off. And that's made a subtraction from my original helmet. Even though if I turn mask glass back on, it looks pretty normal. It makes that subtraction from my original helmet so I can combine the visual idea that I'm looking for here. I have created the piece that will become glass, and I have created a layer that keeps the opaque parts opaque. And now, using blend modes, I'm going to combine the two of them together. So I'm going to go into mask glass because I can't see my face through here. And if I try to take my brush set to black, it's just going to paint black paint on the layer. We don't want that. I'm going to change the blend mode on mask glass to hard light again. And that will create that see-through effect while maintaining the original opaqueness of my helmet layer. Does that make sense? You can see how many steps it takes to get this concept translated, but Photoshop is a very powerful and available tool that can do something like this. So if you're interested in applying some more intermediate actions, some more intermediate things like that with your adjustments, let me know and I can help you with your specific composition, because all of these steps are only related to my scene right here. That makes sense? All right, cool. Any questions? All right, cool. Thank you guys for listening.